I have to laugh so I don't cry. It's Romania Black, and we're on episode 32 of Revolutionary Girl Utena, and I'm drinking my coffee black tonight, and with no booze, because, I feel like we need to stay sober for this week, because last week, Nanami walked in on something that she sure didn't expect to, and now knows things. But the thing about Nanami in this series so far is that she's been interacting with Mikage, she has interacted with Akio, she's interacted with a lot of characters, and nothing's come out of it. So it's always just been either she forgets, like everybody forgot about Mikage, or she just doesn't think about the whole thing with Kozu and Akio. Like, she just lets it slide by. And so I'm like, you've let it all slide by, Nanami. And last week we had the episode where she found out her brother ain't her brother. And that's just thrown everything into a whirlwind, and all of her trust is completely on edge, and it's just... We're in the not fun arc, and I don't like the not fun arc. Obviously there's lots to talk about, but I enter these episodes with a feeling of dread, absolute dread, and it's a weird kind of dread. It's not like the dread that I felt during Neon Genesis. That was more like, things are gonna be crazy. I'm gonna hurt watching this, aren't I? That's the feeling, and you all knew this was gonna happen. I do have a lot of comments about episode 28 and 29, which was the Ruka arc. A lot of comments on that, so that's good. I do also have a comment about episode 24. Meredith Flugelhorn for episode 24, which was the Nanami episode with Tsubaki, right? Said, I never noticed the detail about Saionji spending the money Wakaba gave him on a carving kit instead of lunch. That idiot and his sense of humor, his sense of honor and decency, smothered by patriarchy and the school's machinations. Is he so desperate to get back to the school in part because his family would not accept an expelled student son? Or I added in my response being like, or is it because of Saionji's possible difference in sexuality and not adhering to gender norms? You know, after episode 31, I thought, could Saionji be Nanami's Wakaba? Could Saionji be for Nanami what Wakaba was for Utena back in episode 12? Could that be the case? I would love Saionji to come in here and bitch slap Touga and do something. I mean, I would love it. If the theory that Akio's choo-choo stands, Saionji's already kicked him once, why not do it again? If Saionji ended up being like the savior of this series, and he's been the way he has been the entire series, I would forgive him for many things. I also like how this series made me instantly feel for Nanami by the end of this. Like, I've given Nanami the hardest time about her antics, about the animals chasing her, and about her being this, like, gag character. And by the end of last episode, it was like a semi-truck just of seriousness rammed into the tone. And you're like, okay. All right, this is what we're doing now. I also thought with episode 29, I was looking back, could it also be that Ruka freed Juri from what was her eternity, possibly enabling her to move on if the time came? I thought about that. I was like, you know, is Ruka saying he wanted to free Juri? Was it freeing her from her eternity with the locket and her love of Shiori? We'll have to see, but we'll talk about that. H Banana 7 said, this is also reading way too into things, but the time of day seems like a symbolic factor, especially the golden hour when everything is tinted orange. Objects are out in the light, but colored, one can say, distorted. It's not a coincidence that the sex car drive happens at night. Nighttime is when Akio can control what gets lit and gets focused. I do love this idea that Akio has to have power in the nighttime, like he's a literal vampire. I love the idea that we don't see him do a lot during the day. And even the scenes where in the last in 2 episodes ago with Utena, it did seem like it was kind of orange tinted when he was walking her around during the middle school, right? And then when he picked her up for the car ride, it was kind of like the golden hour sort of thing. So there could be something to that. It could be that Akio's power is not as intense during the daytime. We'll just have to wait and see. Now, Learwin had this really big comment for episode 28, which was really, really good. And they talk about Shiori in this, so bear with me. Many viewers may wonder why someone as strong and exceptional as Yuri would fall in love with someone like Shiori, a so-called bad woman. And there were people in the comments that did question that, so I thought this comment was really neat. However, I find myself more puzzled by why the depiction of Yuri's unrequited feelings rarely delves into her perspective on Shiori. From Shiori's descriptions of Yuri, we can see her recognition and admiration of Yuri, which further enhances the audience's positive impression of Yuri. But as the one with the crush, Yuri's praise and understanding of Shiori are rarely shown. As a viewer, I can understand Shiori's charm, her beauty, and her interesting, even endearing personality as seen from the God's perspective offered by the story. Yet Yuri's thoughts about Shiori remain elusive. If this aspect had been explored sufficiently, fewer viewers might see Shiori as a mere symbol of a bad woman. This is why I've always had the subtle feeling that Yuri's unrequited love contains a significant element of narcissism. She encapsulates Shiori in the pendant, turning her into a symbol of Yuri's own love and desire. Yet there is a lack of genuine understanding or connection with Shiori as an individual. This seems tied to Yuri's efforts to maintain her self-image within the social structure, and thus, when the pendant shatters, it signifies the breaking of the symbol rather than the emotion themselves. I really like the way that Learwin put that because, yeah, it's basically giving this idea that Yuri sort of made her love for Shiori into this object, and the object was literally Shiori herself and the locket with her face in it. So when it's shattered, it's not like Yuri doesn't love Shiori anymore, because we see that's not the case, but the fact that she's kind of objectified that love is no longer a possibility, which I thought was really interesting. Learwin says, I still really like Shiori as a character. In a certain sense, she's highly proactive, making her a fitting antagonist for the story. Her desires are distorted under societal pressures. She feels tormented by her own lack of power and becomes increasingly aware of the power gap between herself and Yuri due to her longing for Yuri. Unable to strengthen herself, she chooses jealousy, hoping to weaken the other and thereby close the distance. Ultimately, this destructive impulse stems from love and desire, which I wondered if that kind of relates to, well, Akio's terrible. I can't stand Akio, but there's a part of me that wonders if what he's doing and the jealousy he has towards Anthy is stemming from a love and desire that has turned warped and twisted and you can't go back. But what's comforting, okay, now this paragraph, I want to apologize, Learwin, because I was like, I had to go to my moderators after I responded to their comment because they said this. Now listen, they said, what's comforting is that by the end of the story, both Yuri and Shiori are able to face and accept their feelings more honestly. Personally, I lean towards the interpretation they eventually come together out of love. However, regardless of the outcome, they both achieved personal growth and completed their respective revolutions. And I was like, does that mean we're not going to get to see them anymore in the story? Are you spoiling to me that we're never going to see Yuri and Shiori ever again? And I was like, that feels like a spoiler. Why would you word it that way? So I went to tell the mods and they were like, I don't think that's what it means, but I could see why you would think that. And I was like, why do people word things where they sound like spoilers? Y'all need to proofread and go, will Romania think what I've just said is a spoiler? And if the answer is yes, then change that language. Because I was like, are we never seeing Yuri and Shiori again? And the moderator was like, no, I don't think that's what they meant. And I was like, okay, cool. But yeah, they achieved their personal growth, both Yuri, and completed their respective revolutions. Now we know, take my revolution, they completed their respective character arcs in love, but what does that mean for the story? Who knows? But anyway, thank you, Learwin, for that comment. As much as it stressed me out at the end. Thank you. And then finally, Oliver Jajado. They tried to post episode 28's commentary from Ikuhara on YouTube, and for some reason YouTube kept flagging it. It's a really short commentary, so we'll just go with that. But they said, I really like the scene in episode 28 in the fencing hall where all the girls have the hots for Ruka. Shiori is the only one who's staring down at Yuri instead, and when she notices Yuri is paying attention to Ruka too, only then does she look over to him and decide to wait for him in the locker room. During the car ride, when Ruka is seducing her by talking about miraculous power and stuff, he's using ours and yours and mine. But Shiori only responds with, I can make it mine. Already hinting at how she actually has no interest in him either, only using him to make Yuri jealous and to feel powerful as well. And then Oliver Jajado shares, I looked up Ikuhara's commentary for episode 28, Whispers in the Dark. Shiori's character is the embodiment of Juri's weak point. That weak point is love, breaking apart the other person. That means controlling the other person's life, bending it to your own imaginings in the real world. It's the ultimate form of romance. I like how this series takes kind of a darker look at romance and showing that it's not just sunshine and roses and sex and happiness. There's a lot of darkness to romance, and there's a lot of like ugly undersides to love. And this series does not hesitate to show that to us, which I really appreciate. Because it is more realistic that way. So then for episode 29, Oliver Jajado says that the episode's duel is so amazing and easily my favorite of the show as well. It was such a great decision to interlace and mirror the earlier Juri and Ruka duel with the official Juri and Utena duel. As far as for Juri, her meaningful duel was one against Ruka. This is now the second time that Utena, even though she has the power of Dios, was unable to actually conventionally defeat Juri by piercing her rose. And in the end, we even have the dueling arena crying for Juri too. The first time we've had any environmental influences in that place. Not to say we can't have any more, but that's the first time that's happened. Also, I was in my response, I was saying, well, is that because Juri used the power of lesbians to to defeat the dueling arena? So Juri was unable, the power of Dios doesn't affect lesbians. Clearly. So that's all we got to do. And Juri is a self-fulfilling, understood, knows what she is lesbian. So all we got to do now is get Utena and Anthy to recognize their love for one another, and Akio's power is useless. Can we have that happen, please? And thank you. I really need that to happen, please. And thank you. But I think Ruka, like Touga, Saionji, and Miki earlier in the series, is yet again another representation of masculinity and a facet of the role of the prince. I would agree with that. I feel Ruka's case is a bit similar to Miki, wanting to free Anthy during the Sunlit Garden episodes in the first arc. He is also a prince who is acting all for Juri's sake, wanting to save his princess even if it's against her own will, despite knowing himself that he will never be with her anyway. I love the combination of him and Miki's arc. I think that's really cool. I hadn't thought of it that way, but there is a lot of comparison there. But with his belief that there needs to be a sacrifice and his desperate ends justify the means mindset, exposing and pushing Shiori for playing with Juri's feelings and punishing Shiori for playing with Juri's feelings, not even shying away from assault to make Juri hate him on purpose. I feel he is blind to all the potential harm that he may cause along the way. Yeah, that's the thing. He's so wrapped up. He was so wrapped up last week in trying to get Juri to hate him, trying to get Juri, if he's like, well, fine, if I can't have you, then I want you to at least be rid of me. All of this stuff, he didn't realize the damage that he was doing necessarily, which is so interesting to me. And so then we have the commentary for episode 29 this week. The boy who does nothing but transfer schools. The boy who was supposed to be gone came back. He has always appeared at the same specific time. Frankly, I don't like him. He always prods mercilessly at the exact places I don't want prodded. One day, I'd noticed that I'd changed. I'd always hated myself so passionately, but somewhere along the line, that suffering had vanished. Was that his doing? Even if it was, though, I still hate him. And somewhere along the line, he's left again. People say that he changed schools. At a hospital, I dropped by to visit a sick friend. I overheard the nurses talking. It sounded like one of their patients had died. Apparently, at a certain specific time, he always used to slip away from the hospital and go someplace. Where? He told the nurses, I go to visit someone dear to me. And he left a request with his family. If I die, please don't tell anyone. It couldn't be. It couldn't. I mean, he transferred schools. I'm sure I'm just overthinking this. I'll be waiting for him, my dear him, to transfer back here. I created an episode around that incident. I got chills. Y'all. Ooh. There were definitely aspects about episode 29 that felt real. They felt like they were someone's experience. They felt like it wasn't just a villain of the week. It wasn't just a fictional story. There were parts of episode 29 and how it delves so deeply into our ideas of relationships and commitment and our emotions around love that it felt like it had happened to someone and we were just watching a documentary about it. So that's crazy. Oh my gosh. But whoo. Well, okay. I'm not ready for this episode, y'all. I've wasted 15 minutes, but ever since episode 30, I have been filled with dread, and we're on episode 32, and I need Nanami to get some help, and I need Nanami to not forget, and I need Nanami to be able to tell Utena, and Utena to find out that Akio is a bastard. So my fear is that we're only on episode 32. And that seems like something that would happen around, episode 36. So anyway, thank you all so much for watching this video and my reaction. And I hope you enjoy this madness. But we are going to start episode 32 of Revolutionary Girl Utena. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1. And I'll see you all on the other side. Remember how I said I didn't have any booze in this coffee? Well, I went back for round 2 and I didn't forget it this time. Why are we in the not fun arc? Why are we not having fun anymore, Utena? You bitches, I was promised Yuri and shenanigans, and I've got that, yeah, but these episodes, they hurt. They physically hurt. I was gonna say, and God, I'm knock on wood, maybe we're at the worst of no, we're not at the worst of the worst. What am I saying? We're not at the worst of the worst. I know we're not. I was gonna say episode 30 was my least favorite episode of the series because it just hurt. And when I say my least favorite, I'm not saying it was of least quality, because I'm sure you could go back to the very beginning and the damn episode, where Nanami went to India to find spices, that's like a fever dream now compared to how far we've come. You could argue qualitatively that the earlier episodes, like episode 8 with the elephants or whatever episode that was, you could argue that logistically that's the weaker episode and might be your least favorite, but I can have fun shenanigans. I can do that. You know what I don't like? Incestuous sexual assault. That's what I don't like. Is that so wrong of me? But I honestly, episode 30 was my least favorite because it just made me feel sick and there was nothing good about it. And there was nothing good at all about it. And as someone who has been through sexual assault, it's not fun to see it on screen. It's really not. It's, some people are probably, I'm sure some people maybe are just like, it's so fascinating because it's so real. Yeah, if you've been through it, it's not great to see it on screen. It's just really not. And mine was over 10 years ago, so I it's not fresh, so I'm good enough to watch stuff like this and be okay. But it's just like, I could do without, But I think this might be my least favorite episode. And not because it's bad, and not because there's not things to talk about, but because I think there's just a lot of wasted opportunity, I think, in it. And maybe I'm putting the cart before the horse. Maybe this is just an episode where things had to be set up, and then later on it will all make sense, and it'll be like, no, you just gotta wait, and then it'll all make sense, just you wait. But maybe that'll be the case. But I really had expectations of how I thought things were gonna go down, and man, this episode is so frustrating. It's frustration the episode because it's just right there. It's right there. If those characters take 2 more steps forward, we would have things figured out. But no. Every avenue at this episode was just like, nope. Actually no, but no. And I'm like, and Anthy's being weird. I'm like, I don't know what to feel about Anthy anymore. I'm like, I wish the show would make up its mind with Anthy, if we're supposed to empathize with her, or if she's yandere, or if she's evil. I wish it would make up its mind, do something with that, but I know it's intentionally making us mad. That's by design. We're supposed to be frustrated at it. But I swear to you all, if this has some sad ending, if this series has a sad ending, I am going to flip out on y'all. Don't do that to me. I can handle an ambiguous ending as long as it has some happiness. I can handle a bittersweet ending as long as there's a possibility of happiness. But if there's a sad ending and there's no chance of happiness, we're going to have words. Because that's not my style of tea. But anyway, so I also tried to find the dual lyrics for this song to make it easier on myself. They don't exist anywhere. There was one site, and I was very careful because I don't want spoilers, obviously. There was one site that had the lyrics, but they were all in Romanji, and they're all in the kanji and the original Japanese. There was no English translation. I'm like, well, that's fair. That's fair. So we're just going to have to go through the episode and go back through that. But I am going to be a naysayer probably this whole episode and just fighting through it the whole way. But that's what we got to do, right? That's what we got to do. So I will give Nanami this. She tried to tell Utena in the best way that she could what was going on. And you are correct, Nanami. Utena is insanely dense. Or she's willfully dense. She doesn't want to know the truth. She's like, everything's fine. Maybe she's tuning Nanami out because she doesn't want to handle the truth. Maybe. I genuinely do think, though, because some characters, like, we'll talk about Nanami and Touga, some characters, they kind of know about one another and they know the truth, whether it's spoken or unspoken. But with Utena, I genuinely believe that she has no clue that Akio is as terrible as he is. I think Utena has no idea. None. And it was so frustrating because I was like, Nanami, you're so close. Just tell them. Just tell Utena. Just tell her. Just let all, if you're going to transfer anyway, just let it all out. It was so annoying. I was like, realistically, if you knew you were going to transfer, I would have aired all that dirty laundry and been like, peace out, bye, transferring, and then just let it go and not have gave a single shit. But the plot won't let that happen. So something to keep in mind at this point is that Nanami, and I'm going to have you all keep this in mind at several points in this episode, that Nanami is a damn 13-year-old. She is barely a teenager. She is a 13-year-old. There are a couple points in this episode where I was like, do we need to back up a step? And then Touga is 17. Correct? Am I wrong? Am I right? And apparently, you all remember last episode when I was like, guess who was right since episode 3 that they weren't related? Suck it, losers. Remember when I said that? And you all were probably watching last episode being like, okay, bitch, wait one more week. Apparently they are related. They both are adopted. Which means that Touga is blood type B and Touga is blood type A. Nanami is blood type B. It doesn't matter that both of their foster parents are blood type B because the foster parents are not their parents at all. They were both siblings adopted by the Kiryu family. There are some questions I have with that. One being, are all of the people that are adopting within Otari Academy, are they all members? Is this like, again, Rocky Horror Picture Show where they're all aliens and the parents are like, we'll adopt these 2 kids. And they've just raised them within Otari Academy. And that's it. And maybe Utena's parents were part of that cult too. And then they died. And that's how Touga and them know them, because these kids have all been raised within a cult. Is it possible? Could be. Anthy and Akio are doing some weird cult shit, so maybe, I don't know. But also, you could explain if that were the case, and Nanami doesn't quite remember any photos of her. It would explain why there are no photos of Touga as a baby, because if they were both adopted, that means that Touga and her were taken in at a specific time when Touga was a certain age. And that's exactly what the dad was like, you guys are siblings, so just keep acting as siblings. You know how it goes. That would make sense. It would make sense why there are no baby photos of Touga, because they were adopted when he was like a kid. The question is, was he adopted after the Saionji meeting with Utena? We don't know. We don't know that far yet. The other thing is, I could definitely understand if something traumatic happened to their birth parents, like they died, and Nanami was only 4 or 5, why she wouldn't remember them and would only remember them. Because she'd be right at that cusp of that age where you don't really quite, as a kid, remember every little thing that happened. Also, this Otari Academy, I'm convinced that Akio is controlling everything within. It's the freaking Twilight Zone, and he could be erasing their memories. So are we surprised? They all forgot about Mikage, so at this point, memory is... I hate when memory is tampered with in stories because it freaks me out, and this story is tampering with things, and I don't like it. But that's to be expected. So Nanami keeps listening to the voicemails about all these women being sad and wanting to be heard by Touga. And what I wanted to do, I'm going to take some pictures throughout this, is they really make Nanami look mature in this episode several times in this episode, which part of this episode is about Nanami's loss of innocence, that she's been forced to face adulthood, which is essentially the end of the world. She's been forced to face it, which is also Akio. So they draw her a bit more mature. There was only one shot in this episode, and I hated it because it looked really sexual, really sexualized. And it took me a second, and I was like, she's 13. Why are we doing this show? Please stop. But it was only one shot, and it's a beautiful image if you don't know she's 13. If it was a 20-year-old woman, you'd be like, oh, okay. But the fact that she's a teenager, and it's very, very male gaze, very sexual, like her booty is glossy. I was like, she's a 13-year-old minor. Let's not go there, shall we? And then the whole sex car drive, which... Anyway, we'll get to that. Which, of course, these are all middle school kids, and it freaks me out. But anyway, so one thing about Nanami is not only that, but the loss of innocence, but the loss of being special. The loss of being special. Her connection to Touga is what made her special to Nanami. We've had the similar thing happen with Wakaba, where her brother, being this knight in shining armor, was her way of being special. It was her way of separating from the other girls and being like, I'm above you all, ha ha ha, because my brother's Touga, and no matter what happens, all you hoes, he can trifle through you all, and it's totally fine, and at the end of the day, he's my brother, and I'm still above you all. And by the end of this episode, Nanami believes that she's lost all of that she's no different than any of the other girls. And we'll talk about in this episode, I do not feel bad for Touga. I don't. He is an asshole. And I'm sure there's going to be some people that are like, he's being manipulated by Akio just the same. I'm like, he willfully chose to do that. He chose willfully to assault his sister and to lie to her and manipulate her on multiple levels. I don't care if he's being manipulated by Akio. At some point, he has made choices, and those choices are his, and he's 17 years old. He has made a decision, and it's not a wise decision. They are terrible decisions. They are not mature decisions, but they are his decisions. And he's an asshole. It's like he's not as much of an asshole as Akio, but he's right up there with him. And it just is so frustrating. Frustration, the episode. So yeah, but she's just afraid that she's like, am I going to end up being like all of these other girls, right? And just not being special anymore. Meanwhile, Utena's had the best sleep of her life. She's doing just wonderful. We're going to put Anthy over here. We're going to put Anthy up here. Anthy is not bothered by what's going on. She is not bothered by the fact that, she's just been assaulted in her sleep by Akio, putting on the happy face, Akio showing up with the apron on, and then Utena's like, oh, yeah. And they don't, the thing of it is, they don't do a thing with Nanami. I was worried the entire episode that they were going to try to hurt Nanami in some way, or force her to be quiet in some way, but I think that they know that Nanami is not the type of character to react that way to seeing it. Like, if Mickey had saw that, well, I don't know what Mickey would have done. if you saw it. Honestly, when she went to go talk to Mickey, we'll talk about that scene a little bit more, but I was a little bit like, I thought it was going somewhere, and then it did not. But anyway, so understandably, Nanami is concerned about what she saw last night, and we'll talk about the scene with her and Utena later. Utena's saying he looks good in an apron. I just like, I want to throw him into a ditch and light him on fire. So yeah, they really make Nanami's suit look glossy in this episode, which was fine, except for the one shot outside the greenhouse. That one was too much for me. But yeah, and Nanami is just, oh, everything's fine. Yeah, and then Nanami is saying, you know, Anthy, you're sitting there saying good morning and looking all chipper like a little schoolgirl when she's like, I just saw you in the throes with Akio last night. Why are you both acting like it's no big deal? Why are you acting like this is all fine? This is weird. I don't like this. So, romance of the dancing girls. Yeah. And the idea of romance. So we talked a little bit about jury and the concept of romance. At least Ikuhara's commentary talked about romance in that, you know, the idea of love being pain and suffering. the ever poetic term of love being suffering, and that is true romance and all of that, which applies to this episode. So the suffering of the dancing girls and the idea of Nanami dancing around the subject and dancing around her emotions kind of relates to it. Choo Choo was literally the only source of levity in this entire damn episode. And I was glad for Choo Choo to be there. I was like, that was well needed. But also, I've heard of standing desks, but the standing tables for breakfast are an interesting concept in this space. So the jam is made from rose hips that Anthy raised. The jam is made from the rose garden. And they're stewed with brandy and sugar, which, you know, the brandy you cook the alcohol out of, so it's probably fine. And I do love the idea that Nanami just crushes the lemon as she's sitting there because she can't stand how fake Akio and Anthy are being right now. She's like, you all are fake. I can't stand it. Also, the idea that Akio is a good cook to contradict Anthy, which again, we talk about siblings not being the same, and that's contradicting Touga and Nanami, which honestly, if I'm being honest with y'all, I never thought going into the series, especially after the first couple of episodes that we had with Nanami, that I would feel for this girl. But I feel for Nanami. Nanami is, I want her to get out of here. I worry that when she gets out of here, she's going to be a ghost and evaporate. But I want her to get out of here because this is just such bullshit. And I feel so bad for her. And I did not think going into the series I would feel so bad for her. And she just wants to be treated decently by her brother. And her brother is a manipulative prick. And I'm like, which honestly, they talked a little bit about siblings being like no family resemblance and siblings being dissimilar. I feel like there are several times, I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, oh, they're siblings, but they're oil and water. They're totally different. Yeah. A lot of times siblings are oil and water. My brother and I are totally different. We are different personalities, different types, different senses of humor. Like, it's a miracle we get on here for One Piece and Arcane, honestly, because we have very different views on things. But that's how most siblings are. And I feel like Nanami, in a way, was kind of banking off of her brother's charm and his stoicness, and she was kind of trying to emulate that. But Nanami is not like Touga. I know the whole series, they've led us to believe that, but Nanami is not like Touga. Nanami is not, she puts on a show of being bossy and puts on a show of her power and strength. And honestly, you could say maybe she's not putting on a show. Maybe Nanami is strong and a boss bitch, and Toga's the one putting on the show, and he's really the one vulnerable that's projecting. You could easily say that. You could easily say that she's the strong one having to deal with the bullshit, and Toga's the one projecting and putting up this facade to hide his own insecurities. You could very much say that. I keep waiting for the shoe to drop and for us to get a Touga-centered episode and to figure out what the fudge his deal is. I keep waiting for that, and I feel like that's the last pin to be dropped, right? And I didn't look at the preview, so I don't know what's going to come up next, but if we had a Touga episode, that'd be real great. But yeah, so then they're salting the egg. Of course we have to show an egg. Why wouldn't we? This whole series about damn eggs, Nanami's egg, right? We got to tie back to that. And then her crushing that lemon in her tea because she's just pissed off. I don't blame her. I don't blame her. And of course, I feel like Nanami is also mad because Utena's over here totally unsuspecting. And Nanami thinks that Utena likes Akio and possibly likes Anthy. And she's like, you have no clue how you're being played. Right? And then whenever Anthy's like, oh, would you like some jam? And Nanami's like, bitch, not from you. I love that it lands on Choo Choo. And then Utena's like, well, you scared Nanami. You scared Anthy. She's like, I don't want any of that jam. I don't want any of that jam. It must be jam because this jelly don't shake. You know. I do love Utena saying you shouldn't be so violent about it. And she's like, you were one to talk. Yep. And Nanami's like, I'm leaving. She's like, bye. Now, at this point, Anthy looks over to Akio being like, are you going to let her leave? And I feel like at that point, Akio had decided he was going to keep her staying by using Touga. I'm about done. I'm done with Akio and Touga's manipulations of everybody in this show. I'm done. I've had it officially. No. And I don't know where Anthy stands in all of this. I can't decide because there's a part of me that feels really sorry for Anthy in terms of the sexual assault happening to her. If it's sexual assault, we assume that it is, but who knows? You know, this show makes you go, well, is it? I'm assuming it is. I've been assuming that it has been. We've had all the clues with the glasses and her position and when he grabbed her and everything. So we assume that that's the case. But she's going along with everything he's saying. And then we could argue, well, he's making her go along with it and he's forcing her to do that. And I've talked about that in previous discussions. But then she's also had this, you know, persona as Mamiya who was very manipulative. And there's the whole turn when she turned back at the end of the episode and looked straight into the camera, that part of you makes you think, well, is Anthy manipulative and is she in on it with Akio and is she as guilty as he is? I don't think he is, but she's trying to keep Utena from learning the truth. Why do you, there's a part of me that's like, Anthy, why would you not want Utena to learn the truth? Do you not realize that Utena is going to suffer if you keep letting her? She's going to end up getting assaulted by Akio. Are you okay with that? Why aren't you preventing that from happening? Why don't you speak up? It felt a little like a betrayal from Anthy in this episode, a hot second. And we'll get to it. But yeah. And then there's her whole yandere traits, which are played off as a laugh when she has the saw blade. And it was kind of funny where she's like, yes, you should be scared of me. But I'm also like, is that her telling the audience, like, you guys shouldn't trust me? I'm like, I don't know. So yeah, and then Utena says, you know, you need to apologize to them. And Nanami says, are you really that stupid? Don't you know what's going on? And Nanami's like, how do you not see it? And Utena's like, what are you talking about? But she already leaves. And then, of course, Akio puts his hand on her shoulder and saying, oh, well, it must be because of her brother that she's tormented, which, blech, I can't take it. And then she's like, there's no reason for you to apologize. And then Anthy is there with Choo Choo. And see, then she says it was really tasty too. Like, Anthy frustrates me a lot in this episode because I'm supposed to be rooting for her and Utena, but there is a lot she does in this episode that does not make me want to do that. And it's frustrating. And I'm like, girl, you need to do something to not be compliant with your brother. Or we, the audience, need to be given information about why can she not do this? Like, what is the reasoning? And I feel like maybe they're going to give that to us. We've only got so many episodes left, but it's annoying. So yeah. So then when she goes to see Mickey, I do love the Neon Genesis, like the Neon Genesis sign holders with all the music stands. Like that felt very Neon Genesis. It felt very Puella Magi Madoka Magica with the chairs. I loved it. I loved Mickey in the window at the piano. I love that she's by the cello, which is fun. But I thought that what Anthy was suggesting was that we were going to have each of the council members stay at the chairman's house, which sounds like a terrible idea. But if they all got to witness what was going on with Anthy, they would all know that Akio is a terrible person, and then they could all band together against him. That's where I thought it was going for a while. And then she was like, no, actually don't stay here. And I was like, Son of a bitch. But honestly, I do think Anthy is right. Or not Anthy. I think that Nanami is right when Nanami says that Mickey would get eaten alive at that place. Yeah, I think so too. I think that as much as I want all the council members to find out that Akio is a terrible person, but they've all been in the car with Akio too. And that's another thing that's frustrating, is that I guess one thing that's frustrating is I'm assuming that Mickey and Juri, have their memories been erased from when they took the ride with the chairman? Because I'd be like, hey, I went on a crazy sex ride with this chairman. You want to talk about it? Because it's kind of freaky. Like, have they forgotten that? Are we just in the time loop again? Which was another thing. As soon as she got in the car, it pissed me off because I was like, so is she just going to forget everything that she's learned? Is she not going to tell Utena about the incestuous relationship? Are we not going to find out? All right, what is this? It just made it feel very pointless in a way, which is frustrating. Damn. This episode frustrated me a lot. But anyway, so it makes me wonder, like, what was the point of all this, you know? If she's not going to change, if she's not going to leave, if it just is just her character's broken now, then what was the point? So then we have the greenhouse because, damn. And so Nanami did say that she loves Touga. And that's the hard part, is that she does love Touga. And that it is genuine. The thing about her love, which is emphasized in the car ride, again, 13-year-old girl, but it's very much almost, it's an asexual and platonic love. Like, Touga keeps trying to play it up, being like, oh, you want to get with me and be romantic and sexual. And she's like, no. She's like, that's not it. She's like, I want it to be familial. I want it to be platonic. She's like, I just want someone that is there for me and that will be there to protect me and that will always be by my side if I need you to be. She's like, I don't want it to be romantic or sexual. She's like, I just want you to be my brother and to love me like a brother, because that kind of love goes beyond the bonds of just sexuality and romanticism. So it was really frustrating to watch her have to do it. And the worst part is Touga was so manipulative. He literally picked Kiko because he knew what it would do to her. I'm like, you son of a bitch, that's not cool. And then he says, knowing that Nanami is there, says out loud that they're not siblings, that he's put on an act, that he doesn't care about her, that she's a boring person. Like, he was so horrible to her, knowing that she could hear all of this. And it's just absolutely, it's heartbreaking. And I felt so bad for Nanami. And he's like, my father said, treat her as well as a real sister. He's like, do you think I'd associate with someone like that for any other reason? This is the shot. It's at 5 minutes and 52 seconds. A common, boring girl like her. This is the one shot that I did not like from the episode. And I feel like it sexualizes Nanami way too much. Because she's only 13, y'all. It's just, the 30-year-old me is like, we didn't need to do that. But yeah, but then Keiko shows up. I do like, of course, Nanami slaps her and there's this big thing in the rose garden while Anthy is trying to fill up the water jug, that the water thing, you know, wasn't working, and then it magically worked once the fight was over. Okay, if Akio's controlling the school, sure. He can control the phone lines, which is creepy in itself, so whatever. And I don't know if him controlling the phone lines as into the world is, I don't know if that's a sign that this is all the Twilight Zone and they're already dead and they're all just ghosts, or if he is a supernatural being that has these powers, and part of those powers is to tap into phone lines and electrical things. We don't have confirmation of either or both, so. But I was glad Nanami confronted Touga. I was glad she confronted him and was like, you know, she's like, I'm fine with you dating other girls, but at the end of the day, we're siblings. She's like, but why would you go out with a girl like her? She's like, you deserve better than that. And honestly, when she said you deserve better than that, I feel like, you know, it was such a read on Kiko. Because she's like, that's a whore. You don't need her. And then rightfully, Kiko gets pissed because she's like, what are you saying? Are you saying I'm trash? And then it's like, this would happen at a Target parking lot back where I live. An incestuous relationship where one girl calls the other girl trash. But the thing of it is Touga keeps implying that Touga keeps saying, you know, are you saying that you're a better choice? Are you wanting to get with me? I feel like Touga has this very warped, skewed perception of love where he is convinced, and maybe it's because of Akio taking advantage of him and making him think that way, which if that were the case, I would feel bad for him. But I think he is confused, and Touga thinks that love is just sexual because that's what Akio has made it out to be. So I feel like he thinks that love is just sexual and carnal. He's missing the forest for the trees when Nanami's like, no, I just want a brother and for you to love me as that. Like, I don't want to be physically with you like that. So, and it sucks. And I feel bad for Nanami. I hate it. And so they just leave her there. And when Toga's like, oh, Nanami, sooner or later you'll understand. I feel like that's him trying to, again, this entire series, Touga has lectured Nanami on how she doesn't understand the ways of the world and like, oh, you'll get it when you're older. Like, it very much had that vibe to it. And I'm like, but you're wrong. So why should she believe you? And it just made me feel so bad for Nanami. I absolutely felt bad for her in this moment. I hated it, to be honest. And for her just to sit there and be like, I'm just like the other girls. I'm not special anymore. It was hard. I felt bad for her. I don't like seeing Nanami cry. This episode made me want to cry for her. And the thing that pisses me off the most is that this series does this stupid thing with the time loop where they keep forgetting the lessons that they've learned. So it almost feels like, what's the point if they're not going to carry it with them? So I hope that Nanami carries some of this with her from the end of the duel. But so far, Mickey and Juri seem to have forgotten after the duel's over. So I'm like, did I just waste my time? But frustration, the episode, is what this is. So then there's Akio. And this scene in the planetarium, where we have what looks like Kane and Akio there, is Nanami in the room with them? Quite possibly. He's looking up at the stars, like he's not paying attention. Kane is in his arms looking drugged out of her mind, and he has her mouth open with another hand around her. And then in comes the other hand, which is clearly Anthy's, right? So she looks drugged. So then the question is, we see the apple with all the knives in it, with all the forks in it. Now, there's a phrase when I was growing up that said, stick a fork in it, it's done. So, which meant... So, I'm like, I don't know if the forks being stuck in it are, like, how many forks are there? 3, 6, 9, 11. If there's 11 forks there, I don't know if that's a sign that she's been stabbed so many times, or if it's a sign that if she's been drugged by the apple's tied to the Garden of Eden. I don't know if they're killing her or if they're drugging her just to keep up the pretense that she's with Akio. There's some disturbing shit going on. And Anthy seems like she's participating in it, but I basically, the uncertainty of one, if Nanami's going to forget everything she's learned the last 2 episodes out of this episode makes me mad. And I hope that's not the case. And 2, I need Anthy to make up her mind. And I know that's being mean to Anthy. I know that's being harsh to her. And there's going to be people in the comments be like, but Anthy's, we need to sympathize Anthy and she's suffered so much. I know, but she needs to shit or get off the pot. Because, like, the thing that frustrated me was that Utena told her, if you ever have a problem, come to me and I will help you. And Anthy knows she's being genuine. And Anthy, I had assumed, isn't talking to Utena because she's afraid of Akio. But before, she's tried to resist Akio. And, I mean, he did get mad at her and possibly assaulted her, but that seems to be what's happening anyway. I was wondering if Anthy is not being as proactive against Akio because Utena is acting like she likes Akio and Anthy doesn't want to get involved or has been told not to get involved. And since Utena is not like actively, ever since Akio moved Utena into this stupid castle, she's been paying less and less attention to Anthy, who she needs to be paying attention to and needs to be paying attention to Akio. And if they have Utena and Akio get close, like romantically or sexually, I'm gonna have a lot of problems with this show. If we're not gonna have Utena, this show has made me believe, y'all have led me to the assumption that Utena and Anthy are gonna end up together, but I need it to be earned, and we only have so many episodes left, so this episode made me question a lot with Anthy and be like, I don't know how to feel about her at this moment, or if I want her to be with Utena, if she's complicit in this. So I don't know. Because Anthy shows up and she's like, oh, I don't know if Kane's eating with us. I'm like, bullshit, you're lying. And he's like, oh, Akio likes to look at those stars, doesn't he? And she's like, he sure does, because that's what he was looking when she was feeding her drugs. Anthy should not be shown with a blade. Anthy should not be shown with a blade. That's just absolutely terrifying. The shaved ice is terrifying. Nanami saying that she's terrified of what's going on. And everything going on. And Utena's just doing headstands. Utena does a lot of headstands and stretching whenever she's not sure what to do. And she has like the ADHD in her doing that. And then we cut over to Nanami, who is up against the wall, who is just looking miserable. And I don't blame Nanami at all. Nanami's pose where she's crouched down like that is me this entire episode. So then Utena's like, oh, I'll just go get Akio. And Anthy's like, oh, no, you actually shouldn't. And I'm like, and she says, no. She's like, you shouldn't, Mistress Utena. And she's like, it'd be wrong to disturb them when they're alone. And Utena's like, well, what are they doing? Let them enjoy their time together. And that's when Nanami's like, you're evil. She's like, why are you doing this? Like, you're a monster. Mm-hmm. If I was Nanami, I would have spilled the beans. I would have said it all right then and there, saying she's too scary. And then she says, oh, am I? I don't know how to feel about Anthy. I have been on Anthy's side this entire series, and this episode made me question that. So, I had to collect myself, y'all. I had to collect myself because I'm about to cry because I'm so frustrated. If you're going to show Anthy as vulnerable and needing our empathy, then using her as comedy relief when you've just shown that she is involved in and knows of assault is such a weird decision. And it makes me not trust Anthy and not know what to do with her. And maybe that's the show's intent, but if I felt like Nanami this entire episode where I was so frustrated because you see everything going down, and I was frustrated that Nanami didn't like just come out and say it, but it's so frustrating to Nanami and she doesn't want to say it because there's a part of her that, had maybe saw her and Touga like Anthy and Akio, and she's like, well, is this how relationships are actually going to be when you grow up? Is this how this is with siblings? And it's not, obviously, but I'm very frustrated with Anthy right now because I just need, I don't know, I'm frustrated with her. This was not a good episode for me. Anyway, so Nanami learns what lesbians are because she thinks about the book and everything. She's like, you're really dense. and Utena's like, what are you talking about? And Nanami basically tells her that they're sleeping together. And Utena completely just ignores her. And Nanami's like, she's like, no wonder you're able to live with that pervert brother and sister. And Utena just completely ignores what she's trying to say. And is like, oh, well, they just seem to all be in tune with one another. She's like, if you don't abandon the relationship you've had till now, you can be like that. And Nanami is like, I just went through in the greenhouse being betrayed and shunned by my brother. Why would I want to be with him like that? But she just wants things to go back to the way they were, where she could be with her brother. It's a lot like with Mickey. Mickey wanted to go back to that past where him and Kozu could have this relationship and retain that innocence. And Juri wanted to go back to that moment where she could have that relationship with Shiori and retain that innocence. It's like Schrodinger's cat, you know, and Nanami just wants that back with her brother. Saionji is the wild card because honestly, Saionji, I keep wanting Saionji to be the savior of this series now. I need Saionji to do it. He's an absolute dumpster fail of a person, but he's actually really nice inside, and I need him to punch Touga in the dick. I just need it to happen. I'm not asking for much. I really thought that Saionji, I had convinced myself Saionji was going to get involved in this episode because of Touga, but nope, maybe he will be in the future. But I do feel for Nanami. And then she goes back to checking the phone. And that's when End of the World calls and says Kiryu is waiting, and it's like, girl, I would have left ASAP. And she's like, do you know who End of the World is? Well, it's Akio. And she's like, I still love you, big brother, but I know we can never go back to the way that we once were, so I'm requesting a transfer. But this show does not let you just transfer. It does not let you just leave. You don't get to just walk out. She's like, because you can't, it's Hotel California, you can't leave. And then we have the car literally crashing in. I think it's interesting that Nanami asks who Akio is, and it's not just who he is. It's like, this man is not human. Who is he? She's like, he's not normal. No. And she's like, I saw him. And I like that she says he's not normal, and the way that she describes it is she saw him assault Anthy, but in her mind, she's like, I didn't think sex was like that. I feel bad for Nanami in this moment because she's having to realize, like, it makes her sick. She's like, I can't talk about what he did. And I don't blame her for not wanting to talk about that. Saying, I can't say it. It's too awful. And a part of me is like, does Touga know what's going on with Anthy and Akio? Is he aware of what's happening with them? Does he know? I hate the idea of Akio laughing at all of this. Being like, what did you see with your eyes? Like, it makes me sick that Akio is getting like some kind of pleasure out of this. It makes me physically sick. And he's like, it was merely your own world, the world you perceive, the world in which you exist. A labyrinth with no way out, where you're doomed by your limited point of view and to endlessly wander the same path. Basically talking about them being in the time loop and them never being able to escape this limited perspective. But what you truly need to see does not lie there. And maybe that's true. She didn't want sex with Touga, so she didn't need to see them doing that. But then Touga gets in front of her to kiss her, which I'm glad we didn't see that because they are brother and sister, so weird. And I like that she pushed him away as the car accelerated. I like that she shoved him off. And she was like, no, get the fuck out of here. I was so proud of Nanami shoving him away because he's like, well, isn't that what you wanted? And she's like, no, that isn't. And he says, well, we're not brother and sister. And she's like, that's not what I want. She's like, you don't get it. You don't get what I want from you as a brother. And he's like, what is it that you want? And what she wants is what she used to have with Touga. She wants a sibling. She wants to be able to be special. She wants to be loved, is what she wants. I guess for me, the part that made me really pissed off was that she went and dueled. I didn't get mad that she beat up the girls. I thought it was fun that she beat up the girls again and was like, just, I love that she beat up the girls to make them be like, quit being a bitch. I'm not. And I do understand why she was like, I'm not like Anthy. I did like that because her saying like, I'm not kissing up to my brother. At first I was like, I'm not kissing up to my brother. I'm not like Anthy. I'm not doing what he tells me to do and letting him take advantage of me like that. She's like, I'm not like that. But then I was like, we don't need the duel because the duel felt completely unnecessary because I was like, do we really need the duels anymore? After we've done them, this is the third round through. Do we really need them again? Like, I like the fact that she beat up the girls that made fun of her and said they weren't listening. That part was great. And I like the fact of her owning that she is not like Anthy. That part's fine. I don't know why we had to take Choo Choo hostage. But then Anthy, is sitting there getting sympathy points, but I'm like, bitch, you are part of this. You are part of this. You are complicit in what your brother's doing. And I just need this show to make up its mind if it's going to present Anthy in a light of needing to save herself, or if she's going to be a villain, do that, or just they need to make up their mind the route they want to go, because this episode sent such mixed signals about Anthy that it was really pissing me off. So, and again, I'm sure there's people in the comment that'll be like, please don't spoil it. I know that the show is going to give me answers. And I know the show is probably like next episode will probably be Anthy themed, and I'll think she's the most sympathetic character that I feel for. But that is not today. So let me have my feelings. Let me have my moment of being pissed off at Anthy. I don't want people in the comments being like, well, you just don't understand Anthy's struggles yet, and I'll figure it out. Just let me be mad for one episode. Let me be frustrated and pissed at her, okay? Because, yeah. And then, of course, Utena's like, what is going on? Now, the Shadow Girls, I'm talking about psychokinesis. Being like, it's all a trick. I'll do it again. It must be a trick. It's a fraud. Well, it's just a trick. It's all just a trick. I thought that meant what Touga was doing to Nanami, describing how he keeps tricking her and he keeps manipulating people over and over again, and maybe it's Akio too. People just don't get it, that they're being manipulated, even though it happens over and over and over again. Nobody ever figures it out. Also, the forks and stuff, like the forks in the apple, if it's tied to that. Anyway, we're gonna go up to the top here. This was one of the most confusing, and the thing about it is, I hated seeing her on the car with her head thrown back. I hated it. It just pissed me off, because I want Nanami to be not reliant upon Touga anymore, and her just like, again, sexualizing this 13-year-old on a car. Do we need to do it? Nope, we don't. We really don't. It makes me feel icky, and I don't like it. It's disturbing, and it pisses me off, because Toga's just like, I am going to be completely complicit in my sister's, sexualization. I'm going to be totally fine with it. And then I didn't understand, I thought she would pull the sword from him, but because this is the weird part about this episode too that I didn't quite understand. He pulled the sword from her, but then she was the one that battled. When in the past, Ruka's pulled the sword from, Ruka did pull the sword from Juri, and then Juri fought, so I guess it's not that far-fetched, actually. No, it was just when Shiori and then Shiori pulled the sword from Ruka and he fought. So I guess it's not far-fetched. That part's fine. But I just didn't I was like, Nanami, I felt like Nanami came so far in this episode, and then she completely regressed and went back. And it just pissed me off. And then it's like, and she's like, what I want to surpass is everything. Thanks, I hate it. She's like, I want to surpass everything, and if I beat you in a duel, then I'll surpass my brother, and then I'll be able to move on from him. Because isn't that what she says there? She shows up, and he's like, oh, right, Nanami. And she's like, yes, I want to surpass everything, and if I beat Utena in a duel, then I'll surpass my brother, the person I was, and everything else. And I'm like, girl, you don't have to duel. Why do these people go with Akio and then decide they have to duel? Stop it. You don't need to. And Anthy's over there just smiling like a damn Cheshire cat. And I'm like, are you okay with all this? So yeah. Also, I do not like the symbolism of Nanami bent over with, again, this is a 13-year-old who has the anatomy of a 27-year-old and is sitting there with her vagina in our faces and Toga's dick right above it. It is just, it's too, the fact that it's incestual, I am not an incest shipper. I can't, y'all. I can't. I know Japan's all into it. Please don't give me the whole rundown. I've watched many other series where everybody's like, well, in Japan, it's really popular. I don't care. I don't give a flying fuck. I've heard it many times before. I'm not a fan. I'm not judging any of you all that are, but I'm not a fan, and I'm not going to be convinced to be a fan. and you can tell me the history of it, whatever, but it just icked me out in this episode to see that sexualization. And I know that it's probably the episode's job to ick us out, to gross us out at this point. But y'all, I'm so tired. I'm so tired. It's only been 3 episodes, and I'm so tired of being thrown through the wood chipper. I'm so tired. Okay, so let's look at these song lyrics, please. Let's look at these song lyrics. The perspective of the place of natural brethren. Well, brethren, siblings. Talk about that. Spherical expansion, of course. Yep. Planar contraction. I mean, we've talked about Nanami's egg. The world of all creation. And so then, yeah, sorcery, aesthetics, astronomy, me, you, the study of our nature. Yay! I like the random yay that's included in this. The perspective of the palace of natural brethren. Well, it's basically the song telling us that they're actual siblings before we find out. An imagined reality. Copied form. Natural fantasy. And then, honestly, Nanami's sword fighting skills were impressive in this episode, and they made me question whether or not Utena was going to win. I'm just disappointed we didn't get Touga riding around in the car. I'm like, why couldn't you show us that? Why couldn't you show us that, eh? But I did feel for Nanami because the duel made me want to root for Nanami in a way because I wanted her to grow and I want her to grow away from Touga and be her own individual and realize that she is special. She doesn't need him to be special. And I hated by the end of this that she was completely broken. She didn't get to realize that she was special. Instead, it's almost like they just get mind broke back into the loop that they were in from before, instead of branching out and being their own person. And I know that's the show's intention, and it sucks. And I hate it. Ugh. But yeah. So then all the cars going as they are fighting, all the tires and the car whipping by. Toga's just standing there next to Anthy, and that seems like a wasted opportunity. They could have looked at each other, did a wink, wink, nudge, nudge. There could have been words there. It felt like such a wasted opportunity. And I'm like, did Touga think that she was going to win or not? Saturn's orbit is a circumscribed platonic sphere. Okay. And then she's like, my brother was part of who I was. Jupiter's orbit is an inscribed platonic sphere. Okay. We've talked about Jupiter and Saturn before in this. My brother was part of who I was. I truly believed. And it says Earth's orbit, Venus's orbit. Yep. I was sure there was a bond between my big brother and me. The worst part is there is. And Toga's a manipulative bastard, and he knows it. Yep. I hate it. Your orbit is an inscribed platonic sphere. But there was nothing at all. Again, I don't know what Touga's backstory is and why he is being such a bastard, but I don't know if his backstory is going to justify all the bullshit he has pulled in this series. I am a child of planetary astronomy. The 5 solid bodies are my descendants. Did there have to be one? Whatever the form, as long as the feelings are there. You are the child of the mysterious Nazca. I want to see what Nazca is, because that's one that I don't know. Nazca is, it's like spiral lines. I'm thinking of Uzumaki, right? Nazca culture is an archaeological culture flourished from 100 BC to 800 AD beside Peru, influenced by the Paracas culture, known for extremely complex textiles, had a bunch of geoglyphs, fun times. Interesting. Their beliefs were based on agriculture and fertility. Art depicts a powerful nature god, such as a killer whale. Harvesters, a mythical spotted cat that Nanami threw into a river. And a serpentine creature. Interesting. Well, that's kind of cool. All right. We'll bring that up there. That makes sense. And then she's like, believe that if you want. Imaginary solid bodies are your descendants. So imaginary solid bodies are your descendants, like the stars. So is it suggesting that this, who you think you are they all ghosts? Is this who you think you are? And she's like, think all you want. I know where those feelings led. And that part to me, when Nanami, has that moment where she looks back and knocks Utena down, I feel like Nanami at that point is like questioning, if my brother and I had this relationship, are we going to end up like Anthy and Akio? Is it going to end up that way? And she doesn't want that. And I don't blame her for not wanting that. Our nature, free will, and existence. Well, there's not a lot of free will in this episode because Akio won't let that be, which is annoying. But then the prince shows up and the car misses Nanami, but the flower's gone. And man, I will give Akio one thing. When he said that Utena is unknowingly cruel, when she said, "Do you feel better now?" I'm like, oh my God, Utena. It was like Coco Montrese when Serena Cha-Cha speaks. She's like, oh my God. No. Yeah, and poor Nanami says, "Tell me what's left for me. Am I just one more fly in the swarm?" And she doesn't want to be not special anymore. The thing that sucks is like, I want Nanami to know that she is special. She doesn't need, honestly, the whole thing with Touga throughout this whole series was just like an afterthought. It was just an extra thing. It was like, oh yeah, she's Toga's sister. But Nanami's like her flamboyant and just abrasiveness and her personality. That was her charm. And it really didn't have much to do with Touga. It was just like, he was a byproduct. And I hate it. So then, yeah. Then we cut to the fact that Akio and Touga are partners in crime, so to speak. Are you going to tell Nanami the truth? And he says, I'm not sure. He says, but you are brother and sister by blood, right? He says, yes. We were both taken in by the Kiryu family. Mm-hmm. Nanami was a baby when it happened. Okay. And so Akio says, well, you should clear up that misunderstanding. And then, yeah, the two of them, he's like, but I find the idea of a brother and sister not related by blood much more romantic, don't you? Such an awful brother. Hate it. Hate it entirely. I don't feel bad for Touga anymore. Touga is the second worst. Akio is the worst, and then Touga is the second worst. And I hate it so much. I really don't want them. Nope. Not here for it. Nope. Oh, this episode made me emotional. It was so frustrating. To summarize, I feel bad for Nanami. She really grew a lot, and my fear is that she's going to regress and go back to being a chipper little character that doesn't have anything. It's just a time loop. So I'm like, was all this character development? Is she going to get anything out of it? Or I really would like Saionji to help Nanami. I really would, but I don't know what Saionji's going to do in the rest of this story. The other thing is, I really need Anthy to make up her mind how we're supposed to view her character. Are we supposed to sympathize with her? I feel like we should. I feel bad for her. I don't like that she's being assaulted, and I get why she can't say things because she doesn't want Akio to get mad. I get that. That's an abusive relationship like trope. But then I want the show, I guess, to make up its mind. Are we going to use Nanami as a joke character? Because it didn't land well with me this episode, even as humorous as it could have been. Is that whole thing about Utena being like, hey, I'm here for you. Is that going to come back? Or are you going to keep Utena in the dark? Why are you keeping Utena in the dark? Why can't she know these things? I need the show to give me some answers now. You've tortured me a lot these last 3 episodes. Now I need some answers, please. And I'm sure the show is saying, but can you handle the truth? I don't know. So please know one thing. I know I'm the moderators are going to be hardcore checking comments. So if y'all try to correct me on anything, I'm not going to be reading it. So, but just be patient with me. Be patient. I am definitely someone who can change their mind if you give me the space to do so. But I'm also the type of person, if people try to force me to believe something, I'm like Michael Scott in The Office. I'm like, I'm going to just not think it harder. So just let me be. Let me take a break from Utena for a week and then come back and we'll do episode 33. I'm ready for that car to get demolished though. I'm ready for it to drive off into a ditch, honestly. Can we have that? Can we be done with the sex car arc? The sex drive arc! It's been the best arc so far in the series, although I did like Mikage's arc a lot. The sex drive arc has been the most, I guess, qualitative of the arcs, but it is also the most frustrating. And maybe you all were as frustrated with this episode as I was. Maybe you were. I'm sure a lot of people really love this episode, but it's not my least favorite because it's not the best written episode or anything like that. It is my least favorite episode because it frustrates me so much. And I just want a happy ending. And the more I get into this show, the more I realize it's probably not going to happen. And I don't know what to do with that. So I just need this to be an angst with a happy ending. Give me that show. Come on now. So in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. Take care. And yeah, I'll be back very soon with more Revolutionary Girl Utena. Bye.